On February 23, 2019, a Boeing 767 cargo plane, operating as Atlas Air Flight 3591, took off from Miami International Airport. The plane was bound for Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport. It carried a routine cargo of packages for Amazon and mail for the United States Postal Service. On board were 3 crew members, Captain Ricky Blakely, First Officer Conrad Aska, and a third pilot occupying the jump seat. The flight proceeded normally for much of the journey. As the aircraft approached Houston, air traffic control cleared the flight for a standard instrument landing approach. This routine maneuver would soon turn deadly. At approximately 11:40 a.m. local time, the plane went into a steep, sudden descent. It crashed into the shallow waters of Trinity Bay, Texas. The impact location was about 40 miles southeast of the intended destination. The crash tragically claimed the lives of all 3 crew members. The accident sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. It prompted a thorough investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, to determine the cause of this devastating event. The final minutes of Atlas Air Flight 3591 were captured on the aircraft's cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder. These black boxes provided crucial evidence for investigators piecing together what went wrong. Analysis of the data revealed a terrifying sequence of events. It began with an unexpected activation of the plane's go-around mode. This mode is designed to abort a landing and initiate a climb back to a safe altitude. First Officer Aska, who was at the controls, reacted inappropriately to this unexpected change in flight mode. He became spatially disoriented. Aska mistakenly believed the aircraft was stalling. This is a dangerous aerodynamic situation where the wings lose lift. His response, however, was tragically flawed. Instead of following proper procedures to recover from a potential stall, Aska pushed the nose of the aircraft down. This action only exacerbated the situation. The plane entered a steep, rapidly accelerating dive toward the ground. Captain Blakely, who was the pilot monitoring at the time, did not recognize the severity of the situation quickly enough. His delayed reactions were not sufficient to correct the fatal dive. The aircraft slammed into Trinity Bay at a high rate of speed. The NTSB launched a comprehensive investigation to determine the probable cause of the crash. This involved analyzing the recovered wreckage, flight data, cockpit voice recordings, and pilot history. Their investigation revealed a chain of errors and systemic issues that contributed to the tragic outcome. The NTSB determined that the probable cause of the crash was First Officer Aska's improper response to the inadvertent activation of the go-around mode. This, combined with his spatial disorientation and mistaken belief the plane was stalling, led him to take actions that sent the aircraft into an unrecoverable descent. However, the investigation went beyond simply blaming First Officer Aska. It uncovered a series of contributing factors that set the stage for the disaster. These included shortcomings in pilot training, inadequate pilot monitoring, and deficiencies in Atlas Air's hiring practices. The NTSB's investigation revealed a deeply troubling pattern of performance issues throughout First Officer Aska's aviation career. His training records painted a picture of a pilot who struggled with basic piloting skills and decision-making under pressure. Instructors described him as impulsive, and noted his inability to remain calm in stressful situations. Aska had a history of failing check rides, which are critical evaluations of a pilot's competency. He had even been unsuccessful in an attempt to upgrade to captain at a previous airline. Alarmingly, the investigation uncovered evidence that Aska had deliberately concealed the extent of his performance deficiencies from Atlas Air during the hiring process. This included omitting information about failed check rides and negative performance reviews. These revelations raised serious concerns about Atlas Air's vetting process for new pilots. It also highlighted a critical gap in the aviation industry at the time: the lack of a comprehensive, readily accessible pilot records database. Section 5. A fatal lack of oversight, Captain Blakely's failure to intervene. While First Officer Aska's actions were the direct cause of the crash, the NTSB also found fault with Captain Ricky Blakely's performance. As the pilot monitoring, Blakely was responsible for maintaining situational awareness and intervening if necessary. The investigation revealed that Blakely did not adequately monitor the flight path and instruments during the critical moments leading up to the crash. His delayed recognition of the severity of the situation meant that valuable time was lost. When Blakely finally did attempt to take control and correct the aircraft's deadly descent, it was too late. The NTSB concluded that Blakely's failure to effectively monitor the flight and intervene promptly contributed to the crash. This highlighted the importance of clear communication and assertive decision-making in the cockpit, especially during emergencies. Section 6. Systemic Failures. Atlas Air's hiring practices scrutinized. The NTSB's investigation exposed significant flaws in Atlas Air's hiring practices. The airline relied heavily on designated agents to conduct pilot background checks, rather than performing these crucial checks in-house. This outsourcing of responsibility created a gap in the information flow. It prevented Atlas Air from having a complete picture of their pilots' histories. In Aska's case, Atlas Air's hiring process failed to uncover his history of training difficulties and performance issues. Had this information been readily available, it is highly likely that Aska would not have been hired by the airline. The NTSB criticized Atlas Air's lack of due diligence in verifying pilot credentials and experience. They called for stricter industry-wide standards for pilot hiring and background checks. The tragedy of Flight 3591 served as a stark reminder of the critical importance of thorough pilot vetting. Section 7. A database delayed. The FAA's role in the tragedy. The NTSB's investigation into the crash of Atlas Air Flight 3591 also placed a share of the blame on the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. The investigation revealed that the FAA had long recognized the need for a comprehensive electronic pilot records database. Such a database would allow airlines to easily access a pilot's complete history, including training records, certifications, and any history of incidents or violations. Despite this recognized need, the implementation of such a database had been repeatedly delayed. At the time of the crash, the database was still not operational. This delay meant that airlines like Atlas Air lacked a centralized, reliable source of information when vetting potential pilots. The NTSB concluded that the FAA's failure to implement the pilot records database in a timely manner contributed to the crash of Flight 3591. They urged the FAA to expedite the database's development and implementation as a critical safety measure. Section 8. Preventing Future Tragedies, the NTSB's recommendations. In the aftermath of the Atlas Air Flight 3591 crash, the NTSB issued a series of safety recommendations aimed at preventing similar tragedies in the future. These recommendations address several key areas identified during the investigation. One key recommendation focused on improving pilot training and performance. The NTSB called for enhanced training protocols. These included better training for recognizing and responding to spatial disorientation, managing startle responses, and handling unexpected flight mode changes. They also emphasized the importance of strong crew resource management, encouraging pilots to communicate effectively and challenge each other's actions when necessary. The NTSB also urged the FAA to mandate the use of flight data recorders that capture more parameters, providing a more comprehensive picture of flight dynamics during accidents. Addressing the deficiencies in pilot hiring practices, the NTSB recommended stricter regulations for background checks. They advocated for the mandatory use of the pilot records database once it became operational. This database would provide a centralized system for tracking pilot history, ensuring that airlines have access to complete and accurate information when making hiring decisions. Finally, the NTSB called for the aviation industry to accelerate the implementation of advanced safety technologies, such as automatic ground collision avoidance systems. These systems could help prevent crashes by automatically taking control of an aircraft to avoid a collision with the ground, even in cases where the pilots are incapacitated or disoriented. Section 9. In the wake of disaster Atlas. Air's response and industry changes. The crash of Atlas Air Flight 3591 sent shockwaves through the aviation industry, prompting both the airline and regulators to take action to prevent a similar tragedy from occurring in the future. Atlas Air responded to the NTSB's findings and recommendations by implementing significant changes to its operations. The airline overhauled its hiring practices, strengthening background checks and requiring more thorough verification of pilot credentials and experience. They also implemented new training programs for their pilots, focusing on the areas identified by the NTSB, such as spatial disorientation, startle response, and upset recovery. Atlas Air also expressed its full support for the NTSB's call for a comprehensive pilot records database. The airline recognized the importance of such a database in ensuring the safety of its operations and the industry as a whole. The FAA, spurred by the NTSB's recommendations and mounting pressure from the aviation community, accelerated the development and implementation of the pilot records database. The database, while initially voluntary, is on track to become mandatory for all airlines. This significant step forward will provide a centralized system for tracking pilot history, allowing airlines to make more informed decisions when hiring pilots and ensuring that potentially dangerous gaps in pilot records are addressed. The tragic crash of Atlas Air Flight 3591 served as a harsh reminder of the importance of continuous improvement in aviation safety. The NTSB's comprehensive investigation, its unflinching identification of contributing factors, and its forward-thinking recommendations have led to significant changes within Atlas Air and the aviation industry as a whole. While nothing can bring back the lives lost in this tragedy, the lessons learned from Flight 3591 have undoubtedly made the skies safer for everyone.